a 22-year-old female, and I live in a one-bedroom apartment with my turtle Godzilla, my dog Bear, and a little mouse that I named Buffy. Now, for privacy reasons, I'm going to keep the city I live in private. I moved into my apartment last year in June, when I was 21, when it was just me and Godzilla. It was my first time living on my own, and honestly, the apartment felt so empty without a dog around, which I was totally used to growing up. The silence was weird, like I'd come home and just hear the filter in Godzilla's tank humming. So I would go out in the early morning hours and walk around, mostly to calm my anxiety. I start hearing noises, or think I see shadows moving in the corners. So one early morning, I went for a walk at around 1 a.m., and I saw this stray dog near the convenience store. I pet it for a little bit, which actually helped a ton. As I started walking home, I noticed someone walking behind me. I got nervous, so I picked up my pace, and when we got under the streetlights, I saw that it was a clown. Like full makeup, the big shoes and everything. I was a little ways ahead of the clown, so I was able to get away from him faster. He actually ran after me, but those big clown shoes he had on slowed him down, thank God. I could hear them slapping against the pavement behind me, which was honestly terrifying. I got back to my apartment building and ran up the stairs 2 at a time, completely out of breath. Then I forgot my door was locked and just slammed into it at full speed. Hit it so hard I literally tumbled backwards and landed on my back. I got my key out with shaking hands, unlocked my door, and after getting inside, I locked it immediately and put the chain on too. I just stood there trying to calm my breathing for like 10 minutes. I never saw that clown again, but I haven't gone for any early morning walks since then. Now, in October, I started looking for a dog. I tried finding a puppy on Facebook, but most of them were in the panhandle of the state. So I decided to look local and found an ad for 2 dogs who needed a home in my hometown. There was a black dog and a brown hound dog mix. The pictures were kind of blurry, but they looked sweet. So I messaged the person right away and asked about the black dog. She told me that his name was Bear, and he was a black lab English Springer Spaniel mix, about 3 years old. She brought him to my apartment that same week, and honestly, my anxiety went down that night. Just having him there made such a difference. Bear is very protective of me. At first, whenever I walked him, he would bark at everyone we passed, which was embarrassing. But now he doesn't do that anymore. He's a big fluff ball in the apartment when people come visit. He sniffs Godzilla when I have him on my lap, which is hilarious because Godzilla just stares at him. And whenever he sees the mouse Buffy, he just looks at her for a second, then walks away like she's not even worth his time. Now the second incident leads to the third incident. So a homeless man started sleeping out by the dumpster in the apartment complex last month. Since there's no trespassing signs posted, the cops said they couldn't remove him, which was frustrating. A week later, I was walking Bear at night for the last time that night. I took him to the field next to my apartment to let him sniff around. Next thing I know, Bear starts growling really low, then lunges forward hard. I turned around, and the same homeless guy is about 3 feet behind me. I didn't even hear him approach. Bear lunged again, barking like crazy, and the guy took off running into the dark. Now, the last time I saw the homeless guy was the scariest incident I had with him. So whenever I'm inside my apartment, I keep the door locked. I also apply the chain lock and the door stopper lock every single time. No exceptions. I do the same thing at night before bed. Well, I guess Bear got used to seeing me use the chain lock and door stopper lock, because one night I forgot to apply them after I got home. I was exhausted and just crashed. I woke up around 2 a.m. to Bear, nudging me with his nose, like really insistent about it. So I gently pushed him away at first, but he kept nudging me harder. I got up thinking he needed to go outside, so I put my shoes on. When I walked into the living room, I see that the chain lock and door stopper weren't applied, and Bear was doing this low growl at the door. My stomach dropped. So I walked up slowly and looked through the peephole. And I saw the homeless guy standing right there twisting my door handle back and forth. I was so scared I couldn't move for a second. Then I reached for my phone to call 911, but I'd left it charging in my room like an idiot. Then I heard a door open and my neighbor came out. This older guy who lives across the hall. He asked the man what the hell he was doing out there. Then Bear suddenly started barking really loud, catching me completely off guard. But the man got scared way worse because he literally fell backwards and hit the wall. He scrambled up and took off running down the hallway so fast, he almost tripped over his own feet. I unlocked my door and opened it. My neighbor asked if I was okay and I just nodded, couldn't really get words out. I thanked him and went back inside, and then hugged Bear so tight after that. Probably squeezed him too hard, but he didn't seem to mind. I fully believe that if Bear hadn't gotten used to me using the chain lock and door stopper lock, and hadn't been so persistent in waking me up to warn me that someone was trying to get in, something really bad could have happened that night. The guy would have probably been able to get in since I'm such a heavy sleeper. I truly believe Bear saved my life that night. That wasn't the first time he's saved me from creepy men, but it's definitely the first time he's warned me that someone was actually trying to get inside my apartment. I'm so grateful I found him online that day, and that the owner was willing to drive him out to me. He's naturally protective, and I don't know what I'd do without him now. He's saved me 6 other times from men approaching me or following me around. But those are stories for another time. I filed a police report the next morning, and they finally trespassed the homeless guy from the property. In 1978, my dad got a job in Las Vegas, Nevada, so our whole family had to move from Houston, Texas. I was just 13 years old at the time, and honestly, I was pretty tiny for my age, shorter than most kids in my class. Now at the time, Las Vegas wasn't the huge city it is today. It was still growing fast, but it felt much smaller back then. Since houses closer to the city center were really expensive, my parents decided to buy a place on the outskirts of town where we could actually afford something nice. The house was brand new, and we were actually one of the first families to move into the neighborhood. So the neighborhood was pretty empty, and there were maybe 5 families living there, including us, and a few other houses were still being built. But mostly, it was just empty dirt lots everywhere you looked. Then, one afternoon, I was feeling really bored, stuck inside the house. So I decided to take my mom's bike out for a ride around the neighborhood. I also brought along our family poodle, who sat in this cute little basket attached to the front of the bike. But the problem was, my mom's bike was way too big for me. My feet could barely reach the pedals properly, and I had trouble keeping my balance. I wasn't a good rider at all on that bike, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get outside and do something fun, even if it meant wobbling around on an oversized bike. Now, growing up in Houston, I was used to grass and trees everywhere, so this desert landscape in Las Vegas was completely new to me. I didn't want to ride off the paved roads and risk falling or getting stuck, so I kept to the streets. I was just cruising around the empty neighborhood, enjoying the ride despite wobbling a bit. The streets were so quiet since hardly anyone lived there yet. After a few turns, I realized I had ridden into a cul-de-sac. That's basically a dead-end street that loops around in a circle, so cars can turn around and head back out. And as I started turning around in the cul-de-sac, I noticed a big black car had pulled up right behind me, completely blocking my way out. It was one of those huge old Cadillacs from the 1970s. the kind that looked like a boat on wheels. But what really freaked me out were the windows. They were tinted so dark that I couldn't see inside at all. I had no idea who was in there or what they wanted. My heart started racing when I looked around and realized there were no houses on this particular street. So without even thinking, I jerked the handlebars and rode my bike straight onto one of the vacant lots, desperately trying to get away from that car. The second I rode onto that sandy lot, the bike's tires got stuck. I had no idea how to handle riding in loose desert sand and completely lost control. I crashed over onto my side, hitting the ground with a thud. Our little poodle went flying out of the basket and immediately took off running across the lot, terrified and yelping. That's when I saw the car door open. The driver stepped out and started walking toward me. He was this massive, dark-haired man, absolutely huge and intimidating. But what scared me most was the look on his face. His eyes had this cold, menacing expression that I'll never forget. My whole body went ice cold with fear. He didn't say anything at all, just kept walking toward me with that terrifying look of determination on his face. Complete silence, which somehow made it even scarier. I was completely tangled up in my mom's bike, frantically trying to stand up and run. But the bike tires had sunk deep into the soft sand, and also my shoes kept slipping and digging in too. Just as the man came around the front of his Cadillac and was heading straight toward me, another car suddenly pulled up and stopped right between us. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was one of our neighbors from down the street. One of the only 5 families living in the whole neighborhood at that time. He must have been driving by and saw what was happening. He quickly got out of his car and called out, asking what was going on and if I was okay. And the moment he did that, the big scary man just stopped in his tracks. Without saying a single word, he turned around, walked back to his black Cadillac, then got in and drove away. My neighbor came over and gently helped me get untangled from the bike and stand up. I was shaking uncontrollably and crying, partly from fear, but mostly from pure relief that someone had shown up to help me. He was so kind and patient. He helped me catch our poodle, who was still running around scared and confused. Then he lifted my mom's bike out of the sand and carried it back onto the paved street for me. Before I started riding home, he told me he'd follow behind me in his car the whole way. He wanted to make sure that creepy man in the black Cadillac didn't come back or try to follow me. The entire ride home, I kept glancing back nervously, but my neighbor stayed right there behind me. Looking back now, I realize how incredibly lucky I was. If my neighbor hadn't been driving home at that exact moment and noticed something was wrong, that man would have definitely caught me. But every single time that memory comes back to me, I thank God for putting my neighbor in the right place at exactly the right time. He saved my life that day, and I'll never forget it. I got my first apartment after leaving my parents' place. My high school friend and her husband were my roommates, so we lived in a really good apartment building with nice facilities. Now one evening, I was getting dressed up because my boyfriend and I had plans to catch a movie. I was standing in front of my bedroom mirror, doing my makeup and picking out what to wear. That's when I realized my window was slightly open and I could hear people yelling and arguing outside in the parking lot. Their voices were pretty loud, but I thought it was just neighbors having some disagreement. I decided it wasn't my business and kept getting ready. The shouting continued in the background, but I just turned up my music a bit and ignored it completely. When I finally stepped out of my bedroom, the whole apartment felt unusually dark and quiet. Most of the lights were off, which seemed really weird. I walked through the hallway calling out for my roommates. As I entered the living room, I immediately noticed the sliding glass door to our balcony was wide open. Both my roommate and her husband were standing outside on the balcony, looking tense. She was holding her phone up to her ear, talking to someone in a worried voice. I stepped outside and asked, "Hey, what's happening?" "There are some people down in the parking lot," he said. "They're fighting pretty badly." I walked closer to the balcony edge and looked down. In the parking lot below, I could see a small group of people clustered together under the streetlights, and they were screaming at each other. I turned to my roommate, who was still on the phone. "Who's she calling?" I told to her husband. "The police." I nodded and headed back inside. I went to my room to grab my phone and check if my boyfriend had texted about when he'd arrive. I was sitting on my bed scrolling through messages when I heard my friend suddenly yell something from the balcony. I couldn't make out the words through my closed door, so I quickly got up and rushed back out to see what was going on. When I came back to the living room, I saw my roommate's husband quickly sliding the patio door shut and locking it. My friend was sitting on the couch, looking nervous. "What happened?" I asked. He stepped away from the door and said, "She just shouted down at those people fighting that we called the police on them. They all stopped and looked straight up at our balcony," he said. "They saw exactly which apartment we're in. I think they might come up here looking for us." "We need to turn off all the lights and stay quiet," she said. I felt a wave of worry wash over me. I got to my bedroom and switched off the light and TV. Everything went dark. Before heading back, I carefully pulled back one of my window blinds, just a little, to peek outside. Down below, I could see the group of people from the parking lot. They were walking toward our building entrance. My heart started beating faster as I watched them disappear inside. I let go of the blind, and it snapped back into place. I walked quickly back to the living room where my roommates were sitting in the darkness. "They just went into the building," I told them. My roommate's husband pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. He started looking around the room and asked, "Do you know where I put my baseball bat?" My friend quickly got up and went to the hallway closet. She pulled out the baseball bat we kept stored there. Her husband grabbed it from her hands. The three of us just sat there in the dark living room, barely talking, and every couple of minutes, one of us would get up and quietly look through the door's peephole to check if anyone was in the hallway outside. After what felt like forever, my phone buzzed, and it was a text from my boyfriend saying he was almost here. I showed them the message. "We're all coming with you to the movie." "Yeah, there's no way you're going downstairs alone. We'll all go together." I quickly texted my boyfriend back, explaining that my roommates wanted to come too. He said that was fine. A little while later, he texted that he was downstairs. The three of us carefully went down together, and when we got outside, we told my boyfriend everything that had happened. He said he hadn't noticed anyone suspicious around the building, and nobody followed us to his car. Before we went inside, they made me promise to never walk around alone anymore, especially at night. They also insisted I always carry something for protection, like pepper spray. And since that night, I always keep pepper spray in my purse wherever I go. It's been a while now, and thankfully, I haven't needed to use either of them. My son was born about 2 years ago, and the delivery was really tough on my wife. She almost didn't make it, and after the birth, she couldn't do much for several days and could barely walk for weeks. That meant I had to juggle my job and take care of our baby boy as much as possible. So it was really exhausting, but we made it through. And the best news is, my wife recovered completely, so everything turned out okay in the end. When we finally got home, things were still hard. My son cried a lot, but that's just what babies do, right? So I didn't think much of it at first. But as time went on, he started noticing things around him and got to know me and my wife. Like one afternoon, I was playing with his feet. He always loved that and would giggle like crazy. But then something weird happened. He just stopped laughing mid-giggle and stared past me, looking at something over my right shoulder, and his eyes were totally focused on whatever he was seeing. He started whining then. Within seconds, he was crying hard. I felt this cold chill run through me and quickly turned around, but there was nothing there. That's when the nightmares started. I kept dreaming about this person in a dark cloak with this really creepy grin. I was already running on barely any sleep with the new baby, so these dreams were wearing me down. I was so angry at my brain for making this stuff up when I was already exhausted, but even angrier at the idea that something might be threatening my family. Whether it was real or just in my head, I wasn't going to stand for it. The thought of anything harming my wife and son made my blood boil. Now this went on for a few weeks, and then one night things got really intense. I passed out from exhaustion, and when I opened my eyes, that cloaked figure was standing right over me in my bedroom. I blinked a few times, trying to figure out if I was still dreaming. Then she laughed. This awful high-pitched laugh that made my skin crawl. Suddenly, I felt this overwhelming pain shoot through my right arm. It was so intense I couldn't even scream at first. I don't know how long it lasted, but it felt like forever. Then I woke up for real, in my actual bed, and my hand was still there, perfectly fine. But after that, I knew I couldn't sleep in my bedroom anymore. So I quietly went to the living room where my son's crib was. I slept in there for the next few nights. Then one particular night, my son just wouldn't settle down unless I kept my hand on his chest. So I pulled his crib close to the couch and rested my hand on him while trying to fall asleep. I was still awake when I suddenly felt him sit up really fast, faster than I'd ever seen him move before. He stared right past my head and let out this piercing scream, unlike anything I'd ever heard from him before or since. I immediately scooped him up and held him tight against my chest, and I prayed to God, asking for strength to fight whatever this was, and went back to the bedroom where the nightmares had started and prayed there. At first, I felt afraid, then angry, but I stood my ground and chose to believe this would end. I'm not sure if my prayers actually changed anything in that house, because we ended up moving shortly after. But the nightmares stopped completely, and my son never stared at that wall and cried again. This experience was different from typical ghost stories, but it shook me to my core.
My name is Thomas. I've been working the late shift at our local Burger King for about 2 years now. It's not glamorous, but it pays rent and the hours work for me. I'm a night owl anyway, so being behind the drive-thru window from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. doesn't bother me the way it would most people. This all started maybe a month ago. I was working the drive-thru solo. We're usually understaffed after midnight, and that's when a car pulled up to the speaker. Male voice, pretty unremarkable. He ordered a large double Whopper with cheese meal with a Coke. It was pretty standard. The one notable thing about the encounter was when he went to pay, he only rolled the window down just enough to slide his card through, and his windows were tinted so I couldn't see his face. He paid and I handed him his receipt, but then he just drove off, like without stopping at the second window to grab his food. I waited there with his bag for a few minutes, wondering if he'd be coming back. Eventually, I just set the order aside and ended up eating it later. People do weird stuff sometimes, so I didn't think about it too much. About a week later, it happened again. It was the same order and the same exact thing happened. Someone paid at the first window and then drove off before picking up the food. I remember thinking, that's strange. Someone did the exact same thing last week. But I wasn't quite able to connect the dots at that point. I just figured it was a coincidence. It wasn't until it happened a third time that I realized it was the same person making these orders. At that point, I knew something weird was going on, but I wasn't going to complain. The food was made, paid for, and I was the one who got to enjoy it, so I kept eating the free Whopper meals and tried not to think too hard about why some random dude was essentially buying me dinner every few days. This went on for a few more weeks. The guy would show up every 4 or 5 days, always late, usually between 1 and 3 a.m., and always with the same order. I started to almost look forward to it in a weird way. Like, it's been a few days. Wonder if my mysterious benefactor is gonna show up tonight. One night, I was working the speaker at around 2 a.m. when I heard that familiar voice through the speaker. I knew what was about to happen, and I was right. He ordered the same meal, which I knew I'd be eating. But this time, he said something else. Something that made me freeze up. He said, and I'll never forget this, "I hope you've been enjoying those Whoppers, Mr. Hurley." My last name is Hurley. I don't wear a name tag with my last name on it. It's not posted anywhere customers can see. There's no reason at all that this guy should know my last name. I just stood there for a second, not saying anything. My brain couldn't catch up. Then I started talking into the speaker, asking who this was, what he wanted, and how he knew my name. I must have said, "Who is this?" 4 or 5 times, but he never answered. And this time, he didn't even pull up to pay. I heard his engine rev, and then he was gone. I was rattled for the rest of my shift. There was nothing I could do, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. Little did I know, things were about to get much worse. When I got home after my shift, I found a note on my doorstep. It was a handwritten note that said, "I know what you did. You have 3 days." I just stood there staring at it with my hands shaking, and I started feeling really, really sick, like someone had punched me in the gut. I have no idea what I supposedly did. I've been racking my brain trying to think of anything that could explain this, but I've got nothing. This sounds so stupid, but I don't have enemies or secrets. I'm a 24-year-old guy that works at Burger King and plays video games on his days off. Not exactly living the most exciting life. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I just sat on my couch with the lights on, dreading whatever was going to happen next. But nothing happened. I had no choice but to just move on. It turned out I wouldn't have to wait that long, because the next night at work, that guy was back. This time, he didn't even bother playing games. Instead of ordering food, he just asked me to write something down. Then, before I could even respond, he gave me an address. It was some random place on the outskirts of town, in an area I didn't recognize. And then he told me I had 2 days to deliver him $10,000. I damn near laughed at that. I didn't think he was serious, but he clearly wasn't kidding. As soon as he drove off, I immediately went back to being terrified. There was absolutely no way I'd be giving that guy $10,000. I didn't even have $10,000. I still don't. So I decided to ignore it. I figured it had to be some elaborate scam or prank from someone I knew. I should have called the police right then, but I didn't even think of that. 3 nights later, I thought things were over. I hadn't dropped any money off, and nothing had happened. But of course, I was wrong. I was sitting there watching TV, winding down for my shift, and out of nowhere, I was jolted up by the sound of shattering glass. I hit the floor on instinct, thinking someone was shooting at me. But when I finally got up and looked around, I realized someone had just thrown a rock through my window. By the time I went to look outside, whoever had been there was long gone. This time, I called the police. I told them everything, including the address I had been given. They said they'd check it out and told me to stay vigilant. They really didn't do much. They just told me they'd patrol the area a little more closely. And without any doorstep footage, which I obviously don't have, there was nothing they could do. And that was 3 days ago. I've called in sick to work the last 3 nights, but I don't even think that's gonna do anything since the guy clearly knows where I live. I can't afford to not work, and I can't afford to move, so I'm stuck in this nightmare until the police can track that person down. I think I might try getting them to track the credit card number that the guy used to pay for the Whopper meals. But other than that, I'm not really sure what to do. Why I got targeted, I have no idea. Hopefully things don't escalate from here. I graduated from college about 8 months ago with a degree in communications, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, has been incredibly useful in helping me secure gainful employment. That's sarcasm, by the way. I'm still living with my parents, and I haven't been able to find a real job yet, so I'm off to a great start. In the meantime, I drive for Uber and Uber Eats, sometimes both in the same night, depending on what's popping. It's not a career, but it's money. It lets me feel like I'm doing something productive while I figure my life out. I know that sounds kind of pathetic, but it's what I've got right now. I drive mostly on weekend nights, Friday and Saturday, usually from around 9 p.m. until 2 or 3 in the morning. That's when the surge pricing kicks in and the drunk college kids need rides home from the bars downtown. It's not technically a night shift, but it feels like one. This happened a few weeks ago. It was a Saturday night, maybe around 1:30. I was about ready to call it. I was about to turn off the app when one more request came through. The pickup was downtown, which was fine, but the drop-off location was really far away, past the suburbs even. I almost declined it for that reason, but the fare was too good. The girl I picked up was completely normal. The drive took about 40 minutes. By the time I dropped her off, it was past 2. And then I was alone, out in the middle of absolutely nowhere with a 40-minute drive back to civilization. I turned the car around and started heading home. Not 10 minutes into the drive, I saw a car stopped in the middle of the road with its hazards on. I approached cautiously, and I realized there were 2 people standing in front of the car, waving their arms like they were trying to flag me down. My first instinct was actually not to stop, but I'm someone who can't just ignore a person in need. So against my better judgment, I decided to stop. I stopped the car about 20 feet away from them and rolled my window down a few inches. Just enough to hear them, but not enough for someone to reach inside. It was a middle-aged couple, which actually put me at ease a little. That is, until they started talking. The woman did most of the talking. She had this frantic energy about her, but also something that felt slightly rehearsed, like she'd given the speech before. She said they were warning drivers about a collapsed bridge ahead. She went on to say it happened earlier that day, and they'd almost driven right off themselves. She pointed down the road into the darkness, and said if I kept going that way, I'd end up in the river. So naturally, I asked them what I should do instead. The husband spoke of a turnoff that was about halfway between where we were and the bridge. He said it cut through the woods, and that it would add some time to my drive, but it would get me back to the main highway without having to deal with the bridge. I thanked them and started driving. Something felt off. I didn't know what it was, but I knew one thing. I was gonna trust my gut and just drive the way I had been intending to go. About a mile down the road, I saw the turnoff they'd been talking about. It was this narrow dirt path that disappeared into the trees, and it was barely wide enough for one car. I decided to keep driving, and a few minutes later, I reached the bridge. I slowed down a little, but it was fine. It wasn't collapsed for sure, and it didn't even look damaged at all. I drove across it without any issues and made it back to the main highway a few minutes later. Even though nothing happened, the experience stuck with me to the point where I didn't sleep well that night. I kept thinking about what would have happened if I'd followed that couple's instructions, if I turned down that dirt road alone in the middle of the night. A few days later, the curiosity got the better of me and I did something stupid. I drove back out there. It was the middle of the afternoon this time, broad daylight, which made me feel slightly less insane about the whole thing. I retraced my route from that night. Those people weren't there this time, obviously. When I got to the turnoff, that dirt path into the woods, I slowed down and pulled over. To my surprise, there was something new. There was a sign nailed to a tree right at the entrance of the path that simply said, "Dead End." That sign hadn't been there before. I would have definitely noticed it that night, even in the dark. Someone had put it up in the last few days. I sat in my car for a minute, staring at the path. In the daylight, it didn't look quite as ominous. It was just a narrow dirt road that disappeared into some dense trees. I wanted to explore it a little, but I was worried about my car getting stuck, so I decided to go it on foot. I'm not sure what I was expecting to find, but being that there was daylight out, I really wasn't scared at all. I turned off my engine. As soon as I stepped out of the car, though, I got a bad feeling. I stood there at the edge of the path, trying to see further down, but there wasn't much to see, really. I don't know what it was, but something about standing there and actually being out in the open discouraged me from walking in. Things went from 0 to 100 in about 2 seconds. As I was turning around and walking back to my car, I heard a scream ring out behind me. It was this awful scream, definitely a woman's, and it came from somewhere deep in the woods down the path. I can't tell you how fast I was out of there. Before I could even think, I was already speeding away. I don't think I've ever been so scared before, and that was about 2 weeks ago. I haven't been back to that spot since, but here's the thing. I can't stop thinking about it. Part of me knows I should just leave it alone, but I've been thinking about asking one of my friends to come out there with me. If I do, I'll record a video and send it, but for now, all I can really do is wonder about that scream and those people. This happened a few winters ago when I was working overnight security for a commercial warehouse complex. I was 26 and had been doing the job for 8 months. The shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and I was always the only employee on the site. There was a supervisor I could call if something went wrong, but for the most part, it was just me and the cameras. The complex was in an industrial area on the edge of a small city that didn't have much nightlife. Most nights followed the same routine. Clock in, do a walkthrough of the exterior, then settle into the security office to monitor the cameras. And every hour, another patrol. The warehouse stored mostly industrial equipment and bulk supplies, nothing particularly valuable. The night everything went sideways started pretty normally. It was cold enough for there to be snow falling, but nothing too heavy. I did my first patrol, everything was secure, and I went back to the office. Around 1:30 a.m., I got a motion alert on one of the loading dock cameras. This wasn't unusual. The system was sensitive, and wind or animals could trigger it. I pulled up the feed and watched for a minute, but everything looked normal. Just the empty dock and snow drifting past the floodlights. But the alerts kept coming. Every 10 or 15 minutes, the same camera would trigger. Each time I checked the feed, and each time I'd see nothing. What started to bother me was that the movement always seemed to happen just at the edge of the frame, like something was there but not quite in view. By 2:30, I had maybe 6 or 7 alerts from the same camera. No other cameras were triggering, just that one. At 3 a.m., I went outside to check it myself. The snow had mostly stopped, and the complex was dead silent. I walked the full perimeter of the dock area with my flashlight. I didn't see anything unusual. All the bay doors were closed and locked, and there were no footprints in the snow except for mine. I went back inside. About 20 minutes later, I heard a loud, metallic scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across concrete. It came from inside the warehouse, somewhere deep in the building. I checked the interior cameras, but all 6 feeds showed empty aisles. I was starting to freak out a little bit because I started feeling like I was being toyed with or watched somehow. But still, I explained the noise away by chalking it up to the wind or something. An hour later, though, I heard it again. It was louder this time. The dragging sound, followed by a sharp bang, like something had struck one of the interior doors. I cycled through the cameras again. Nothing on 1 through 5. When I got to camera 6, though, the feed was black. Maybe 3 seconds of static, and then it came back. But something was different. The angle had shifted, just a few degrees to the left, like someone had bumped the camera or adjusted its position. At that point, I had no choice. I grabbed my flashlight and radio and headed into the warehouse. The interior was massive, probably 80,000 square feet of industrial shelving arranged in long aisles. During the day, it was bright and full of forklifts. At night, the overhead lights were dimmed to save power, casting everything in this yellowish half light. I was maybe halfway down the main aisle when I heard footsteps coming from somewhere to my left. It definitely sounded like someone, a person walking maybe 2 or 3 aisles over. As soon as I stopped, the footsteps stopped too. I stood there trying to control my breathing. I remember how tense it was, standing there in complete silence, waiting for a sound that I wasn't even sure would come. For what felt like forever, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to break the silence. In a firm voice, I announced my presence as security and insisted that whoever was there make things easy and reveal themselves. But of course, there was no response. The rest of that patrol was utterly terrifying. I was bracing myself for a fight or some kind of confrontation. The longer I surveyed without finding anyone, the worse that feeling got. But I ultimately finished my patrol without seeing another person, which was arguably worse because I knew with 100% certainty that there was someone in there. I didn't see or hear anything for the rest of my shift, but that didn't make me feel any better. I actually felt somewhat guilty. My job was laughably simple, and I was messing it up in real time. But by the time 7 rolled around, I wanted nothing more than to just get out of there. I reported everything to my supervisor when he showed up on site. Maintenance did a full inspection, but didn't find anything either. Even after everything was double and triple checked, no one was able to identify the method of entry, and I could tell people didn't believe my story. Still though, that night remains one of the freakiest things that has ever happened to me. This memory still terrifies me, and outside of police and some close family, this is my first time fully revisiting it. A few years ago, I had gotten my first job at a 24-hour gym. At the time, I was in a gap year between high school and college, so I worked a lot of night shifts. The gym was open 24/7 and accessed by key card only, meaning often there were only 1 or 2 employees working. People could just check in, use the equipment, and leave. The whole facility pretty much managed itself. All entries, exits, and usage of equipment was processed digitally, so all I had to really do was sit in the office and keep an eye on the cameras. I would occasionally get up and walk around, do some light cleaning, and even talk to some of the guests. This was in a pretty bad part of town, but for the most part, everyone was nice and friendly, and it was one of those gyms where everyone kind of knows each other, considering how few people really come in. This one night in particular, I was working from 8 p.m. until 6 a.m., which is generally a very long, boring shift, but everything that happened that night keeps me up at night to this day. It was around 2 a.m. when I had already done multiple rounds around the building and finished all routine paperwork. I was exhausted, so I just figured I'd sit down for a bit and monitor the cameras. Everything was normal at first. Not many people come in to work out in the middle of the night, but there were a couple regulars who came and went. I had worked here for a few months now, so almost everyone I recognized, except one man. I first noticed him when I saw him using a treadmill in the far corner. Normally this wouldn't catch my attention, as we have new guests from time to time. However, what really caught me off guard was how fast this man was running. I pulled up his treadmill number in the system, where I'm able to live monitor all equipment activity. He was running 9 miles per hour, which was impressive already, but what really shocked me was the fact that he never stopped. 10 minutes went by, then 15. He never slowed or stopped. I looked closer at the camera, and although I can't quite describe it in detail, this man was nothing short of unsettling. He was wearing ragged clothes. He had long, messy hair, and his face never moved once. He was just staring straight forward. Then I noticed his feet. He was barefoot. He had been running 9 miles per hour for 15 minutes barefoot, just staring into the distance. At this point in time, I was very weirded out, especially since he was now the only person in the building besides myself. I pulled myself together and realized that we do have a policy requiring shoes, so I decided I would use that as an excuse to go talk to him. Although his appearance really freaked me out, I got up the courage to leave the office and head out to talk to him. The machine he was on was located almost directly outside the employee hallway, and as soon as I turned that corner, my heart stopped. The treadmill was covered in blood. His feet were tearing apart as he ran. My heart dropped. Blood not only dripping, but splattering from his feet and ankles for every step he took. His face was still stone cold, staring straight ahead. His mouth was wide open as he ran. He looked like he was on every drug on the planet. At this point, I was terrified. He looked crazy enough to the point that my gut was telling me he was dangerous. However, I still mustered up the courage to yell at him to stop. I can't even remember exactly what I said, but I did have to raise my voice a bit so he would hear me over the thudding of his feet as he sprinted. He didn't say a word, or even turn his head for that matter. He just continued to sprint and stare forward with his mouth open. I yelled again, something along the lines of, "Hello, what are you doing?" He then muttered the words, "Are you there?" in the coldest, raspiest voice I've ever heard. He wasn't out of breath or even panting as he spoke. I told him to stop a few more times, and he repeatedly just said, "Are you there?" The pool of blood at the end of the conveyor was growing, and at this point, I just figured I'd call the cops. I went back to the office, picked up my phone, but before I called, I glanced at the monitors again. He was staring directly at the camera, sprinting, bleeding, mouth open, staring at the camera. I turned away and then heard him screaming from outside the door. He wasn't even screaming words, just screaming at the top of his lungs as he stared at me through the camera. Suddenly, he hopped off the treadmill. He didn't even turn it off, and he sprinted out of view of the camera. I immediately started clicking through the feed searching for him, but he was out of view of every camera we had in the building. I had checked every camera except one, the employee hallway. Sure enough, there he was, about 6 feet from the office door, just standing there. I don't even know how he had gotten into this hallway without a key card, but I didn't hesitate to quickly lock the door. Almost 5 seconds after I locked it, the doorknob rattled. Now I was calling the cops. He started screaming again and shaking the door as I explained to dispatch what was happening. They told me police were 5 minutes out, as I just waited in the corner of the office while this man was trying to get inside. His scream was terrifying. It was so deep it barely sounded human, and he kept it up for an unbelievably long time. This went on for about 3 minutes. I thought if he got in here, I was gonna die, and I felt absolutely helpless. Suddenly, though, the screaming stopped, and the door didn't move. I checked the cameras again, and he was gone. I couldn't see him anywhere. Eventually, the police arrived, and I made them search the entire place before I would even leave the office. They told me he was nowhere to be found. I answered their questions and drove home. I quit the next day, and have not entered that gym since. I have no idea what that man wanted, or what kind of crazy he was. I still wonder what would have happened if I didn't lock that door.
met on a dating app. His profile looked fine, nothing strange. Clean photos, normal job, normal messages, complete sentences. That alone felt reassuring in 2019. I texted my friend Hannah the restaurant name and address. I sent a screenshot of his profile. I shared my location, I picked the place, the time, the lighting. Every rule you follow when you don't want to end up as a story someone else tells. And still, standing there with my keys in my hand, I realized none of that mattered. I got there early, sat with my back to the wall, ordered a soda, and watched people come and go. When he walked in, my first thought wasn't fear. It was, that's not him. Not in the people choose flattering photos way. More like I'd agreed to meet one person and a different person showed up expecting the agreement to transfer. He was older than his photos. Not a little. Thinner hair, heavier face, clothes clean, but worn in a way that felt careless. He smelled like too much cologne. He walked straight to my table like he had every right to be there. "Hey," he said, leaning in like we were familiar. I stood up because standing buys you a second. He went for a half hug. I angled it into an awkward side pat. Then I said it. "You look a little different than your photos." "Don't be shallow," he said. "You're not like that." It was fast and practiced, like he'd run this exact moment in his head already. I should have left then. I know that now. But my brain did what it always does. It tried to solve the social problem instead of the safety one. Okay, stay calm. Don't escalate. Maybe bad photos, maybe nerves. We sat. He talked like he was filling time. Questions that sounded normal but felt off. Where do you work? Do you live alone? What part of town? Are you close with your family? When I answered vaguely, he just kept looking at me like he was waiting for more usable data. When I mentioned I was a UX designer, he made a face. "So, tech," he said. "That explains it." "Explains what?" I wanted to ask. But I didn't. When the server came by, I smiled and asked for the check early. He leaned back like I'd insulted him. "We already committed to tonight," he said. "I told you I have an early morning." "I took time for you," he replied. "Be respectful." Respect, not connection. Ownership. He stood first. "Let's go outside," he said. "It's loud in here." I didn't want to go outside. Outside meant fewer people. But if I refused, would he follow me anyway? Would he make a scene? So I went. I kept my phone in my hand and walked a half step behind him. Outside, I stopped. "I'm going to go," I said, trying to make it final. He smiled patiently. "You're doing that thing," he said, "where you act like I'm dangerous. I'm not. I just don't like being disrespected." My thumb was already over my key fob. "I'm leaving," I said. Then he was beside my car too fast, like he knew exactly where I'd parked. He positioned himself at my driver's door. Casual, hands down, blocking without touching. "You run at Laurelhurst," he said, "in the mornings." I didn't react the way I wanted to. I said, "What?" "The park," he continued. "You like the loop. You stop at that cafe on Burnside sometimes." My body went hot. "That's public," I said. "You've got that little sticker on your bike," he added, looking toward my car, the one on the frame. I had never mentioned my bike or the sticker. "How do you know that?" I asked. He leaned closer, still not touching. "You're smart," he said. "Don't play dumb. You want to act like I catfish you because I don't look perfect." He nodded toward the restaurant. 10 minutes, he said. "Sit back down like an adult, or I stand here all night." I looked toward the front of the building. People were there, but far enough away to feel unreachable. I unlocked my phone and lifted it to my face like I was calling someone. "Yeah," I said, loud now. "I'm leaving. I'm in the parking lot. I wasn't calling." I shared my location again, opened a voice memo and hit record. Then I hit my car alarm. The sound ripped through the lot. It changed everything. It turned our private moment public. The flinch and the emotion underneath the irritation. I hit it again. The couple turned. The server stepped out. A car slowed. "I'm fine," I said loudly, like answering a question no one asked. "I just need you to move." His palm finally cracked. "You're making yourself look crazy," he said under his breath. "You're great," I said. Move. He looked around and made a choice. He stepped back just enough. I slid into my car, locked it, and drove. I didn't check mirrors. I didn't do anything normal. I went to Hannah's place. She let me in, took one look at my face, and locked the deadbolt. The next morning, I went home to shower. I moved fast from my car to my building and didn't look around. That afternoon, a message popped up from a new account. No photo. Random username. Made it home safe. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. The worst part wasn't the message. It was that I couldn't tell if he was bluffing. Because once someone knows enough about you, a bluff and a threat feel the same. That's what I took from that night. Not be careful on dates. Not move in public. Something colder. Safety isn't just about choosing the right steps. It's about noticing when someone is trying to make you follow theirs. I'm not reckless with dating. I'm a civil engineer. I plan things. I double-check things. After my divorce, I kept my life deliberately small. Work, gym, home. Dating apps were something I approached cautiously, almost clinically. We matched in early spring. She wasn't flashy. No model photos, no weird filters. Just a woman who looked like she had a job, a routine, a real life. She wasn't intense. She didn't rush. She didn't push for anything physical or emotional. Our conversations unfolded slowly, over months. She remembered small details, asked about my projects, checked in after stressful days. When I mentioned the divorce, she didn't pry, just acknowledged it and moved on. It felt respectful. I suggested FaceTime more than once. She always had a reason not to. A broken camera. Anxiety. Next week. It was always framed as vulnerability, not avoidance. I believed her because I wanted to. By the time we planned to meet, it felt less like a first date and more like finally syncing real life with something that already existed. We went to a quiet wine bar, dim lighting, soft music. I arrived early because I always do. I texted her, "Here." She replied immediately, "Parking." Then, "I'm nervous, lol." Then, 2 minutes. I watched the door, ordered a glass of wine, checked my phone again. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I sent another message. Nothing. I called, straight to voicemail. People came and went. The bartender looked over more than once. I sat there longer than I should have. Leaving felt like confirming what I already knew. Eventually, I paid and left. In my car, I stared through the windshield for a moment, hands on the wheel, feeling stupid in a way that burned more than anger. Driving home, I told myself the obvious explanation. Catfish, fake profile, move on. When I got home, I scrolled through our entire conversation again. Months of messages, shared routines, personal details I hadn't thought twice about giving. That's when the discomfort started pressing in. I deleted the thread to put it behind me. And then the knock came. I checked the time, just after 10, and I assumed it was a neighbor or someone at the wrong door. Another knock. I walked to the door and leaned into the peephole. No one was there. Not standing in front of it anyway. The porch light was on. I could see the doormat and my neighbor's house. No movement. Then the voice came. "It's Rachel." The sound was right where the door met the frame, like she was speaking directly into the crack. "Rachel?" I asked through the door. "Yeah," she said. "I'm really sorry. I just need to talk for a minute." Something about the voice didn't line up with what I expected. Not obviously wrong, just like the pitch didn't quite match the cadence. Then I noticed a shadow, just off to the side of the doorframe. She was standing out of view. Whoever it was wasn't trying to be seen. My first thought was, maybe she's different, and she's embarrassed. I didn't want to be the guy who slammed a door because someone didn't sound how I expected. Then the voice came back. "Please, don't do that. I already feel stupid enough." I hated that it worked. I slid the chain into place and unlocked the door, telling myself I'd just crack it and end it there. I opened it maybe 2 inches. That's when I saw the eye. Not a woman. A man. standing inches from the door, pressed sideways against the wall. He was wearing a black ski mask. It was stretched over his face. We both reacted at the same time. I slammed the door. The impact ripped the chain from the frame. The door flew back open as his shoulder hit it. He lunged forward, one gloved hand jamming into the gap, fingers clawing for the lock. I threw my weight against the door, pushing with everything I had. He grunted and tried again. "Relax," he said. The voice was his real one now. Deep, flat, nothing like Rachel. "I just want to come in." I shoved harder and managed to force the door closed enough to engage the deadbolt. The handle rattled immediately. Really hard. I backed away, grabbed my phone, and locked myself in the bedroom. I could hear him move outside. "You almost opened it. That's the funny part." I didn't answer. By the time police arrived, he was gone. No neighbors had seen anything. No cameras caught his face. Just a damaged door frame and a report full of phrases like suspected attempted burglary. The next morning, I understood what really happened. Rachel wasn't the catfish. Rachel was the key. And if I hadn't been so worried about seeming rude or judgmental or wrong, I would have opened the door. I matched with her earlier that month, right after finals wrapped up. Eugene winters make everything feel smaller. Gray skies, wet sidewalks, people retreating indoors. I'd been spending most of my time either on campus or alone in my apartment, convincing myself I was fine with it. Her profile felt normal. A couple selfies, a hiking photo, one holding a mug with a dumb caption about caffeine, and her messages were thoughtful without being forced. The compliments started early. "You're different. You actually think before you talk. I feel like I can be real with you." I answered slower than she did. She always replied fast. If I took an hour, she'd joke about scaring me off. If I took longer, she'd say she missed me. It felt like a lot, but not in an explosive way. More like pressure building quietly. After a week, she started pushing to meet. "I don't like endless texting. I want something real." I agreed to coffee, but set boundaries. Public place, daytime, neutral location. She agreed immediately. Then she asked what part of town I lived in so she could find something close. I didn't answer that. I joked that Eugene was tiny anyway. She laughed and dropped it. A couple days later, I told her I wasn't interested. I didn't ghost. I didn't dramatize it. I kept it polite. "I've enjoyed talking, but I don't think this is the right fit. I don't want to lead you on." Her response came fast. "Oh, I thought you cared. Did I do something wrong?" I told her no, that it wasn't about that. She didn't get angry. She got hurt. "I really liked you. I don't open up like this. I feel stupid." Then she went silent. No messages, no typing bubble, nothing. I felt relieved. I put my phone down and assumed it was over. Over the next few days, little things happened that I tried to explain away. A blank Instagram account followed me. No posts. Random username. I ignored it. Someone viewed my LinkedIn profile. No photo. Generic name. I told myself it could have been anyone. Then I got a Venmo request for $4.50 with the note. "Coffee?" No name I recognized. No picture. I declined it and blocked the account, annoyed at myself for feeling unsettled. Nothing happened. There was nothing to report, just noise. Until the photo.
Adobe Creative Cloud is designed to be almost like a playground. It's a collection.
My phone buzzed on my nightstand at 11:47 p.m. I was half asleep, still thinking about a paragraph I'd rewritten too many times when I saw the preview of an image message. I assumed it was a group chat, someone sending something stupid before bed. It wasn't. It was my front door. My actual front door, taken from the hallway outside my apartment. The chain lock. The scuffed paint near the peephole. The crooked welcome mat I always kicked back into place with my foot. The timestamp read 11:44 p.m. Below the image was a caption, just to say goodbye. I sat up and swung my legs off the bed before my brain caught up. I crossed the apartment quietly and leaned into the peephole. The hallway was empty. Normally, you could hear everything in my building. Someone's TV through the wall, footsteps on the stairs, the dryer down the hall rattling like it was falling apart. That night, there was nothing, just my heater clicking and the fridge. After checking the peephole and seeing nothing, I stepped back and checked the locks anyway. Deadbolt, chain, the cheap latch that came with the apartment. My phone buzzed again. I'm not trying to scare you. That sentence was worse than the picture, because it meant she knew exactly what I'd do next. That she'd already pictured me standing there, deciding what to do. I didn't reply. Another buzz. I just wanted to see you one last time. You're safe if you don't make it weird. The way it was phrased, like she was setting rules, made my whole core tense up. I moved away from the door and went to the living room window. From the second floor, I could usually see people coming and going. Headlights. Someone smoking under the awning. But there was nothing. The parking lot and the sidewalk were both empty. Then my phone buzzed again. I can hear you. Then the pounding started. The door shook in its frame as her fist hit it again and again. Open the door, she screamed. I just want to talk. I backed away, heart hammering so hard it felt like my ribs were vibrating. She kicked the door. Twice. I know you're in there, she shouted. Don't pretend you're not. Lights came on across the hallway. A door opened down the corridor. Then she leaned close enough to the door that I could hear her breathing through the wood. You think this makes you safe? She said. I know where you live. I know when you leave, she continued. I know when you come back. I can wait. That was it. I called 911. While I was on the call, she started slamming her shoulder into the door, over and over. The frame creaked. Dust fell from the top hinge. I'll get you eventually, she screamed. You can't hide from me. Someone shouted that the police were coming. That's when she laughed. Actually laughed. Good, she said. They won't do anything. Then footsteps, running this time. By the time the police arrived, she was gone. They took a report, asked if I wanted to press charges, told me it was unlikely they'd find her unless she came back. One of the officers suggested a restraining order. Another said, at least she didn't get inside, like that was supposed to help. The next morning, I found a dent at the bottom of the door, the shoe mark still there. I didn't go to class that day. I didn't leave my apartment for 2 days after that. When I finally did, I noticed something that made me stop right there. Someone had scratched a line into the paint next to my door frame. I don't know if it was her. I don't know if she came back. What I do know is that I don't feel anonymous anymore. Nothing dramatic happened after. No confrontation, no arrest. But every time my phone buzzes at night, I think of that photo. It's crazy how fast she decided I belonged to her. I thought I finally met someone who understood me. Later, I realized he didn't understand me. He studied me. Back then, that difference wasn't obvious. I was still in that hopeful place where attention feels like safety, especially when you've spent years convincing yourself you're fine and past it. We met on a dating app in 2020, when everything felt suspended and unstable. My graduate program had gone remote. My internship hours were inconsistent, and I lived alone in a small apartment. His profile was unremarkable in the best way. No dramatic captions, no curated edge. He looked normal, calm, safe. I replied because nothing about him raised alarms. From the beginning, he was patient. Not flirty, not rushed. He asked questions that sounded thoughtful. How are you sleeping lately? What do you do when your thoughts spiral? What does a good day look like for you? He listened. He validated. He said things like, that makes sense, and I'm glad you told me. It felt steady. It felt adult. When things deepened, he shared first, or at least what sounded like sharing. He talked about therapy, about doing the work, about boundaries and triggers, casually, like someone fluent in emotional language. Those words mattered to me. They still do. In my field, they usually mean effort. So I opened up. Not all at once, but enough. I told him about my childhood, about a past relationship that left me with habits I didn't like but understood, about how I learned to be adaptable, useful, calm, because that's how you survive certain environments. He listened closely, and he remembered everything. At first, that felt flattering. Then it started to feel like he was taking notes. The first moment something felt wrong was small enough to almost dismiss. I'd had a heavy week, deadlines, emotional exhaustion, too many Zoom calls. I told him I needed a quiet night, just rest. I said we'd talk tomorrow. He replied, "Don't abandon me." I assumed it was a joke. But then he followed with, "That's not funny. You don't get to do that to people." I explained carefully that I wasn't abandoning anyone. I was going to sleep. I asked him to respect that. "You're triggering me," he wrote. "You promised you wouldn't disappear." We'd been talking for 3 weeks. That's what made it confusing. He wasn't cruel. He was framing my need for space as harm, using language that made me feel like I'd done something wrong by having boundaries. Then the switch. "I'm sorry, I'm just scared. I really like you." The shift was instant. One moment I was the problem, the next I was the solution. I told myself he was anxious, that everyone was on edge, that this was temporary, and I stayed. After that, it became a pattern. If I didn't respond fast enough, he worried. If I mentioned plans, he asked who I'd be with. If I set limits, he treated them like rejection. "You're pulling away. You're doing that thing you do." He said it like he knew me. What unsettled me most was how he reused my own words. I once told him that unpredictability was what hurt me most, that people leaving without warning made me spiral. Later, when I didn't answer for a few hours because I was in class, he texted, "You know what it feels like when someone leaves. Don't do to me what they did to you." That's when it started to feel intentional, like he was building something out of my past and handing it back to me whenever he needed leverage. When I finally tried to slow things down, really slow them, he escalated. "I can't handle this. I'm not safe right now." I read the message again and again. The professional part of my brain kicked in. I offered resources, hotlines, support, friends, options. He ignored all of it. "I don't want help," he wrote. "I want you." That was the moment everything clicked. This wasn't pain, it was control. I told him I wasn't going to meet him, that I cared, but I wasn't responsible for his choices. He softened immediately. "I didn't mean it like that. I'm just scared. Please, just coffee. 10 minutes. I said no. I just wanted to feel close to you. It was framed as affection. It landed as a threat. I blocked him, took screenshots, changed settings, reported it, told people in my life. Everyone was sympathetic in the way people are when nothing has technically happened yet. Be careful. Carry something. Lock your doors. He hadn't touched me. He hadn't shown his face. He just made sure I knew he could. For a while, it was quiet. Then, weeks later, a new account followed me. No posts, no name I recognized. A message request came through. One line. Something he'd said early on, back when it felt safe. "I'm proud of you for surviving." My hands went numb around my phone because it proved he was still there, and that he still had access to parts of me I'd shared when I thought I was being understood. I blocked that account too, and others after it. He didn't need to invent a weapon. He just learned my language, shaped it into something that sounded like care, and used it to keep me from moving. I remember the exact moment I was sitting on my couch, scrolling and thinking, this wasn't just a match. This felt like someone reaching into my life. That sounds dramatic written out, but it didn't feel that way at the time. It felt personal, like someone had touched something that wasn't meant to be shared. In 2019, I was 35, living in Boise. teaching high school English. If you saw me during the day, you'd think I was doing fine. Lesson plans, coffee, dry jokes in the staff room, normal. At night, my house didn't feel normal. It felt like a place that had learned how to be empty. My wife, Erin, had died the year before. Sudden, medical, the kind of loss people apologize for and then avoid asking about. I didn't blame them. I didn't know how to explain it either. That's how I ended up in a private grief forum. Not a public one. A moderated space that required approval. Everyone used first names or initials. People wrote long posts, like letters they didn't want their friends to read. One night, I wrote more than I meant to. I talked about the small things people don't warn you about. How silence starts to feel loud. How I still bought oat milk even though I didn't drink it. How Erin used to joke when she lost her keys. She'd stand in the doorway and say, "The house ate them again." I hadn't said that sentence out loud in months. I posted it, regretted it immediately, and went to bed. 3 days later, I got a match on a dating app I'd downloaded and deleted half a dozen times. Her name was Maya. Her photos were normal in a way I trusted. No filters, no influencer poses. Someone who looked like they actually lived where it snowed. Her profile caught my attention. She listed an obscure podcast Erin loved, mentioned a small local art market Erin used to drag me to, and wrote one line that didn't feel like a line at all. I'm patient with quiet people. Sometimes quiet is heavy. I figured it was just coincidence. Boise isn't big, interests overlap. We started talking. She was calm, patient, not pushy. She didn't rush to meet. She asked thoughtful questions and didn't seem bothered when I took time to respond. Then she said something that made my chest feel hollow. "Do you still buy oat milk by accident?" That detail wasn't on my public social media. I hadn't written about it anywhere except that grief post. I asked how she knew. She replied, "Just a guess. Widowers do that." At the time, it sounded like understanding. Over the next week, it kept happening. She referenced my grading habits, the cheap pens I complained about, the mug I always left in the sink because I hated seeing it empty. It wasn't constant. That's what made it convincing. It felt like someone noticing me, not collecting data. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was in the forum too. That would explain it. So I asked. She dodged the question. When I asked where she lived, she said, "Near enough." When I asked what she did for work, she said, "A little of everything." Then she asked to talk on the phone. I agreed. Cleaned my kitchen, graded papers, told myself I was being ridiculous. Her voice didn't match her photos. Older than I expected. Rougher. Like someone used to cold air or cigarettes. The conversation kept drifting back to Erin. Then she said it. "The house ate them again." I didn't answer right away. She laughed. "You still hear her," she said. "That's sweet." I ended the call. I made an excuse and hung up. My living room didn't feel like my living room anymore. I opened the grief forum on my laptop, found my post, and deleted it. Then deleted my account. Like removing the words changed anything. My phone buzzed minutes later. "Why would you take that away?" That's when it stopped feeling strange and started feeling wrong. I told her not to contact me again. She replied, "You don't get to ignore me after I gave you that." Like she'd given me a gift, like she hadn't stolen it first. I blocked her everywhere. A few days later, a new match appeared. Different name, different photos, same writing style. First message, "Quiet is heavy, isn't it?" I blocked that one too. Then another showed up a week later, and another after that. I contacted the forum moderators, embarrassed. I expected a generic warning. Instead, one of them asked me to send profile details. They replied later, privately. There had been other reports. People contacted off-platform. Matches using wording from posts. Connections that felt intimate before turning threatening. They didn't call it a breach, just suspicious behavior. Helpful advice after the damage was done. Because the problem wasn't that someone read my grief. It was that someone studied it. I never found out who it was. There was no confrontation, no resolution. I changed passwords, locked down accounts, stopped posting anything personal anywhere. But the feelings stayed, like someone had built a map of me. That's the part that won't let go. Because even now, years later, when my house is too quiet and I misplace my keys, I almost say the joke out loud. And then I don't, because it feels like if I open that door again, someone else might answer. If these stories made you rethink who you trust and how fast things can go wrong, smash that like button, hit subscribe so you never miss the next nightmare, and let me know which story got under your skin. And if you think snowy nights are cozy, this next video will ruin that for you.
Peter, can you even see anything up there? Harry, the oldest yet least mature forest ranger, said over the two-way. High on my perch in Tower 3, I had a full 360-degree view of the national forest that stretched out to the horizon. This was a dumb joke that he liked to ask every time that I drew the short straw for this position. Yeah, vision is clear. No smoke, no fires. No adverse weather conditions. Cool, hey, can you see me flipping the double bird to you? He said this so often that I mouthed the words as he spoke. Harry, like stress or radiation, was fine in small doses. But God help you if you have to have a weekend shift with the man. That's a negative, I said. How's campsite duty? Oh, slow. There are like 5 campers here and 2 of them are hosts. Filth Hat Jack is back as host of the Western Loop. Can't stand that dude. Oh, he's not bad. A little gruff, but once you break through, well, he's still a little gruff. I said, trying and failing to find something nice to say about Filth Hat Jack. Gruff like those goats from the fairy tale. Weren't they devils or sold to the devil or tricked a devil? Oh, I'm not up to date with my Billy Goat folklore. It's why they put you up in the tower. Meanwhile, the rest of us grounders are thinking of playing poker later. Ground squirrels, or grounders, was the nickname that Harry made up for anyone not working in a lookout tower during their shift. It never made sense to me. Squirrels can climb trees, which are nature's towers, but the name stuck. Tower dwellers were named after the high-flying sandhill cranes, which inevitably got shortened to sandies. Oh, you all suck at poker, I said. You have to be able to bluff and lie to win. All the people on grounder duty are basically priests. Now me, I can spin yarns like the best of them. Hey Nitnuts, why don't you spin me a yarn about how you lost $100 last time you played? Guys, these two-way radios are for emergencies, Gwen said, her voice sounding more exasperated than usual. She was another Sandy set up in Tower 5 about 20 miles northwest of me. She had gifted kid vibes, which made sense, as she had been one and was easily annoyed with the rest of us. But everybody loved her. And deep down, she loved us too. But like really deep down. Call John Hammond, we found insects in ancient amber, deep. Gwenny, Harry said, dragging out her name. You promised not to play school marm today. George is gone for the week. Let's enjoy a boss-free day. Gwen sighed. 1, I never promised anything, and 2, you know that I hate Gwenny. And 3, I was a troll in the 3 Billy Goats gruff legend, she said before adding. Oh, and 4, you are the absolute worst poker player in camp, Peter. Boom, Harry said. I couldn't see him doing his bullhorn's hand charging at you move, but I knew that he was doing it. The man was in his 50s, he had kids in college. Everyone knows Bud. Yeah, Gwen is right. These 2 ways are for official business only. Sandy 3, out. Have fun with Filth Hat Jack, Gwen said. Sandy 5, out. I'll pray no sudden thunderstorms come rolling in, Harry said with a laugh. Grounder 1, over and out, baby. Suck my butt. Again, this man has a mortgage. When I'm on tower duty, I always bring a book or 2. When you're up in the gentle rocking and quiet of the air, you can get a lot of reading done. I'm currently going through a series of horror movie tie-in novelizations. I just finished Alien and The Fog and was looking forward to The Blob. I wanted to do a run of 40s pulp detective novels next. No, I don't have a girlfriend. Why do you ask? Anyway, after about an hour, my two-way came to life. "This is Sandy 3, this is Sandy 5, do you copy?" And Gwen was always so formal. "Sandy 3 to Sandy 5, I copy." "Hey Pete, you get any emergency calls in the last 10 or so minutes?" "Negative. What's up?" The cabin's two-way started squawking a bit ago. First, it was just static, but then, well, it kind of sounded musical. Musical, how? Sounded like a kid's piano playing Mary Had a Little Lamb, I think at least. It repeated a few times before going silent. Maybe radio signals bleeding through. I thought that at first too, but I haven't heard anything since. Maybe you have a fan out there that really wanted you to hear the rendition of a childhood favorite. If anyone knows I'm up here, I'm already in trouble. No one is scheduled to come out this way today. I wouldn't go speaking that out into the wider world, Gwen. Oh, I'm not alone. Pearl is here with me. We're attached at the hip, you know. Pearl was what she called her pistol. All of us carried something when we went out into the wild. In my civilian life, I'm not much of a gun guy. Out here, though, I understand that it's an important tool in my tool bag. Don't want to be cornered by a wild cat and not have something to scare it away. Oh, Pearl is a straight shooter after all. The best. Let me know if you hear anything, huh? My intuition is pecking at me. Roger. If it comes back, try to record some of it with your phone. Oh, that's a good idea. Sometimes we non-gifted Sandys stumble into one. I regret telling you that all the flippin' time, Pete. Sandy 5 out. Sandy 3 over and out. I hung up the microphone and walked over to the north-facing window. If the weather is clear, I can sometimes make out Tower 5 from here. It takes a minute to spot, but I always can because, as the old saying goes, there are no straight lines in nature. While not technically true, it's mostly true and a useful guide for spotters. The difference between Mother Nature and her wayward child, mankind. I scanned the horizon for anything out of the ordinary, but everything looked serene. This view never changes, but it also never disappoints. The number of hours that I've sat out on the catwalk just staring out at the natural world would astound you. To work as a ranger, you have to have not just a healthy fear and appreciation for the wild, but genuinely love it. I heard electronic squelches behind me and turned to see some of the lights on the cabin's two-way lighting up. I walked back over, picked up the handle, and spoke. Sandy 3, come back. Static broke through the speakers, but that was it. No words and no childhood songs, nothing but grating static. I waited a bit to see if anybody would respond, but after 2 minutes of staring at the speaker, I determined it was nothing. I kicked back in my chair and dove back into my paperback. 2 pages later, Gwen came back. Sandy 3, this is Sandy 5. I groaned as I sat back up and grabbed the microphone. And go for it, Sandy 3. Peter, do you see something in the sky? North, northwest. Trailing the long, coiled cord behind me, I walked to the window and looked in the direction that she told me. I held my hand over my eyes to shield any glare, but I still didn't see anything. I pressed the button. Negative, can't see anything. What is it? I don't know, I was knitting and I heard something whoosh over the tower. Sometimes small planes zip closer than they should, but when I looked out I didn't see anything. At first. And then about 10 or so miles out, the sun reflected off of something silver in the sky. A chopper? Sometimes the fire guys do test runs on clear days. Nothing on the schedule. I tried raising them on the radio, but nobody responded. Well, that wasn't ideal. You want the fire brigade to answer a call. That goes double if you're surrounded by living firewood. A spark could start an inferno that could eat through the entire forest at a speed that would make your head spin. You want me to try to hail them? Yes, she said. Her usually firm voice wavered a little. Pete, this thing is just hovering in the sky. Sometimes they'll do a training run without informing us. It's rare, but it happens. That has to be it. It has to be. Has to be, she echoed. Give me a second. Let me switch frequencies and call. I'll come right back. Sandy 5 out. I gave the sky another glance, but I didn't see anything hovering. I knew Gwen. She was as straight a shooter as Pearl. If she had said she saw something, she saw it. I flipped over to the fire emergency frequency and depressed the button. This is a National Forest Lookout Tower 5. Does anybody copy? Silence. I tried again and again, but nothing. I flipped to a few more frequencies and didn't get a reply. It was like they were ignoring us. I switched back to Gwen and filled her in. She wasn't happy. What the hell? What's going on? What if there's a fire? Is the thing still in the sky? Yeah, it's not moving. It feels like I'm being watched. What's the bearing on your Osborne? The Osborne is a fire detecting tool equipped within every cabin. It's used to determine a location relative to the tower. It swivels 360 degrees and has an accurate topographical map at its center. When you sight smoke, you line up the crosshairs and find the degrees along the side. It's accurate enough with one tower, but more so if other towers can center in and cross-reference each other. 329 degrees in 48 minutes, Gwen said. Let me know what you see. I moved the Osborne to the bearing and took a gander through the crosshairs. My eyes are trained to follow along the ridges, so it took a second for me to adjust to the sky. At first, I didn't see anything with my naked eye. Then I did notice the sun glint off something. Oh, Gwen, I see it. Barely, but there's something there. So I'm not crazy. Well, that remains to be seen. But with this, you're good. I don't like that I can't get through to fire and rescue. That's never happened before.
At Walden University, get the W.
With Tempo Learning, I'm in the driver's seat.
Go faster. Go slower.
What I already know and what's happening in my world sets my pace. Let's do this. Get the W. Walden University.
Try your cell phone. Maybe you can reach them that way. I tried, no signal. I usually have a few bars out here, but not now. Always when you need it the most, right? Yeah, no kidding. Pete, this thing is dropping. Falling or landing. Both? It's a quick, controlled descent. You see it? I didn't. I had barely seen it in the air. If it was quickly falling out of the sky, I had no chance of seeing a thing. Negative. Crap, it just dipped behind the tree line. I'm filling out a smoke report. I don't know what else to do except follow protocol. Let me try to give them a call on my phone. I had a signal earlier. Hold on. I pulled my phone out ready to dial, but noticed that I didn't have any service. It wasn't even roaming. Just blank, like the cell towers had been erased. I tried restarting my phone, but it didn't change anything. I don't have service either. I said into the two-way. Any changes over there? I heard Gwen hit the button to speak, but she didn't say a word. Instead, I listened to her handheld two-way radio click several times, and sure enough, the beginning of Mary Had a Little Lamb had started playing. Finally, she whispered, "Are you hearing this?" "I am." The song suddenly stopped, and a calm, almost robotic voice started to speak. Gwen and I stayed quiet as churchgoers as the voice said, 777 Alpha Omega 6. Unknown, unknown, unknown. Repeat. 777 Alpha Omega 6. Unknown, unknown, unknown. The voice stopped and my heart did as well. Seconds later, the tinny version of Mary Had a Little Lamb started playing again. What is that? Who is sending that out? It sounds like a code, like from a number station. Number station as in secret messages to spies. Those number stations. Spies or government officials, maybe. I'm just guessing. It could be someone's idea of a weird prank. Maybe it's the fire and rescue teams messing with us. Oh, I dated a guy in fire and rescue, Gwen said. They don't have an ounce of a sense of humor shared among them. I think this is legit and I think it's bad. It sounds like a warning and I don't think it's a coincidence it came after this thing showed up and landed. Gwen, we don't know what's going on. I think writing the report is a good idea. You want me to relay a message to the campsites? Get another ranger out there. Maybe you'll get lucky and Harry will get dispatched, I said, trying to lower the tension. Gwen may have sounded calm to the untrained ear, but I knew she was scared, or at the very least, unnerved. I was as well, but I didn't want to share that. She laughed, but it sounded like it was Texas two-stepping with crying. And do you know that he told me the other day that he thought, if given 6 months of training, he could make the Pro Bowler tour with nothing but alley balls. Maybe we should encourage it and give our ears a break. Actually, he said, I could throw cheese like a pissed-off Wisconsinite, Gwenny. She said, imitating his voice. That man has kids in college, Gwen, I said. That man watched 9/11 as it happened, she said. Oh, that's a good one. Our conversation was cut short when we both heard a low rumble and felt a slow-rolling earthquake shake our towers. I grabbed onto my table as the entire cabin rocked back and forth, like a ship hit by a rogue wave. After what felt like 10 hours but was actually just 30 seconds, the shaking stopped. Gwen, are you okay? Jesus Christ, I think I heard something in the tower snap. What? I don't know, I was worried this whole thing was gonna fall over. Was that an earthquake? It felt like it. When the hell has there ever been an earthquake here? As I made a mental note to look up if this area had ever had a recorded earthquake, I noticed the trees about a mile out violently snap back and forth in a concentric circle, like someone had dropped a pebble in the water. The ring of shaking trees quickly spread out, and I felt the concussive wave before I heard it. Again, the tower shuddered from the blast. The northern window shattered, and bits of glass came flying inward. I ducked under the desk with the cabin two-way to avoid Swiss cheesing my body, but several of the shards caught my arm. I winced in pain as the glass bit into my flesh. Not wanting to bleed out, I ripped off the sleeve of my shirt and did my best to staunch the bleeding. Once the blast had passed, I shot up and turned to the southern window. You could physically see the concussive wave working its way through the trees toward the campsites. Gwen, are you good? No response. Gwen, please come back, over. Nothing. Panic started to set in. If she were near the epicenter of that blast, there was a good chance her tower could have collapsed. She could be hurt or well. I didn't want to think that. I tried a third time with no response. My personal two-way squawked. It was Harry calling. He sounded equally nervous and confused. Sandy 3, this is Grounder 1. What was that? I don't know. Are you safe? I think so, but I can't get a hold of Gwen. Oh, crap. Did you see anything? Any smoke? She saw something hovering in the sky that went down near her tower. We tried reaching out to fire and rescue, but they didn't respond. Something was hovering in the sky. Did I hear that right? Affirmative. It went down or landed. We also heard a nod. The cabin's two-way started to chirp. I turned up the speakers and heard clicking and growling. At first, it sounded random, but then I realized multiple things were clicking and growling. It was as if they were communicating with each other. There was a loud, high-pitched electronic squeal that made me slam my hands over my ears. It went on for 10 seconds, and I heard the rest of the glass in the cabin window crack but not fall. When it stopped, I uncovered my ears, but that still didn't chase away the cobwebs. It sounded like my head had been underwater. My ears were swimming. I shook my head and used my thumb to pump at the opening in my ear to help pop them. I heard Harry yelling into my personal two-way. He was jabbering, and I had a hard time making out what he was saying. I took a second, centered myself, and listened. Jesus, Peter, can you hear me? Copy. Christ on a bike, what took you so long to respond? I heard something on the cabin two-way. It sounded like someone clicking, or what I imagined crickets would sound like if they could talk. Crickets talking? Son, did you hit your head? The cabin's two-way speaker came back to life. More clicking, but this was deliberate, as if it was signaling to someone. It sounded familiar, and I had no idea how that was even possible. At first, I couldn't make out what it was, but then it dawned on me. It was parroting back, "Mary had a little lamb." The hell? I said, staring at the speaker. I glared at the little box, wishing it could transform into a TV screen and show me what was making that noise. And that's when I saw the object rise above the tree line and climb up into the blue sky. It waited a beat and then zipped towards me. "Oh no," I said, diving under the desk. At speeds I didn't think possible, the craft whooshed over the tower, making it rattle to the foundations. Harry was going nuts over my two-way, rambling about something, but I didn't pay it any attention. Instead, I ran out into my catwalk to see where this craft had gone to, if it was still even possible. As fast as it was traveling, it might be halfway around the world by now. As soon as I pushed open the door to the catwalk, the air around me felt heavy. It even made my moments slow like astronauts walking on the moon. I wondered if hopping would make me move quicker. I glanced up and everybody in my vision was wavy like when you see gas fumes in the daylight. There was nothing above me that I could see, but I knew it was there. That meant it would have to stop on a dime to be here. Nothing I knew could do that. From inside the cabin, the speaker started bleeding out feedback. At first, it was just noise, but it morphed into something that I had been hearing all day. Mary had a little lamb. It made me realize that it was mirroring the message that it must have heard at the same time Gwen and I had. In an instant, the song stopped, and the air around me returned to normal. Whatever had been lingering around was gone. Harry was calling out for my personal two-way. I ran back inside and picked it up. "Peter, do you copy?" "Copy," I said. "Jesus, what's happening out there?" Before I could answer, my eyes flicked towards the north window, and I saw a thin ribbon of smoke in the horizon. It looked dangerously close to Gwen's tower. I felt my heart start to race. "Harry, there's smoke near Tower 5. I can't call Gwen, and fire and rescue aren't picking up." Say no more. I'll grab the UTV and head out. You have a bearing on the Osborne for me." I glanced up to where I had seen the curl of smoke, but an entire bolt of smoke had replaced the ribbon. Or honestly, more like a thick pea soup fog had stretched for about a mile and was still going. No fire spreads that quickly. It reminded me of those snake fireworks that always underwhelmed you as a kid. You light a small black circle and as it ignites, it expands. At best, it coiled until it became a puff of nothing and blew away in the breeze. At worst, it stopped coiling after about 10 seconds and left a burn mark on your driveway. I had no idea what was going on here. "Jesus, Harry, I don't know what this is, but I'm not sure it's a fire." "Where is it?" "Across the horizon," I said, "and it's growing." "What?" The cabin's two-way came to life. Through the speaker, we heard a pre-recorded message from the Secretary of Agriculture, the person who oversees all the national parks. In a calm and measured tone, they said, "Rangers, this is a code black warning. Please remain in place and do not interfere with any military officials who may arrive on scene. If there are civilians present, please inform them that they are to remain in place and cannot leave. Anyone found fleeing this location will be considered hostile and subject to severe punishments. Repeat, this is a code black warning. Stay in place and do not interfere with any military officials. Thank you for your cooperation." It came and went like a mid-afternoon storm. I wasn't sure what the smoke or fog was, but I was certain it wasn't just a quickly spreading forest fire. This was something different. A gas attack, a small-scale nuclear device, a dimensional rift. My mind was racing. "Harry, what the hell is a code black?" "I got no idea. Why would they send out the military?" "Whatever the reason, it ain't good, kid. I gotta go get Gwen. If she's at the epicenter of this, who knows if she's still." He didn't finish, but we both knew what he meant. I had thought nothing but that since she had stopped responding. Yeah, go, just go, be safe, Harry." "Oh, you know me, safety's my middle name. That and Big Dong," he said, trying to add levity to the tense situation. I gave Harry crap, but that was his true value. He cared about our well-being. I appreciated the attempt, but we were both too scattered to laugh. A grounder won out. I walked back out to the catwalk and stared out at the approaching fog. It was so thick that, as it slowly advanced, the trees would just disappear from view. I thought about Gwen and my guts twisted into pretzels. I had been concerned that the tower collapsed earlier, but now that seemed quaint. Was she still alive? Had whatever the code black warning entailed harmed her? The pace at which the fog was approaching was increasing. I'd reluctantly have answers to those questions before too long. I swallowed hard and ran my hands through my sweaty hair. I wanted to do something to help, but I had no idea what I could even do. Would the military arrive soon? Would I be pressed into service? The cabin's two-way started squawking again, and then I heard a familiar voice whisper through the speaker. "Sandy 3, this is Sandy 5. Do you copy?" "Gwen." I ran back inside and nearly ripped the two-way off the wall by yanking on the microphone. Gwen, are you okay? What's going on?" "Peter, I can't say much. They may hear me." "Who?" "The creatures in the fog." I fell back down on the ground. I had a hard time breathing. The what?" "There are dozens of them and they're multiplying." "What are they?" "Shh, don't speak," she whispered. "I hear some at the base of the tower." I held my breath, praying that she had closed and locked the access to the catwalk. If they went up into the tower, Gwen had nowhere to go. My heart raced and I felt like I might pass out. I drummed on the floor, praying that I would hear Gwen's voice again. "They haven't figured out that I'm in here yet," she whispered. "So far, they've stayed out of the tower." I wanted to respond, but I knew my voice coming out of her speaker would be a beacon that led to her. I stayed quiet. She had kept her finger depressed on the microphone button, and I could hear everything going on in her cabin. I wasn't sure if she had actually held it down or if she wanted to leave a record of what happened to her. I heard Gwen's heavy breathing and the occasional rustling of her clothes. I imagined she was tucked under the desk, the long cord trailing from the wall. Sweat beaded my forehead and poured down my face. Seconds later, I heard something that chilled me. It was the clicking and growling noises that I had heard earlier. There were dozens of different ones in the distance. These things had surrounded the tower. Jesus, I think I hear one on the stairs. Lock the catwalk door, Gwen. Please tell me you've locked it, I said to myself. As long as she had the microphone in her death grip, None of my messages would reach her. She was smart, and I was hoping she did the smart thing. Peter, I don't know what's going to happen, but thank you for always being nice to me. Tell Harry the same, dumb jokes and all. But between you and me, the man has personal knowledge of the country's mood during the 2008 housing crisis. Tears formed at the corners of my eyes, but I smiled. Yeah, good one, Gwen. I'm not saying this is goodbye. I still have Pearl with me, but in case, Jesus, there are more of them on the stairs now. She set her voice lowering to the point where it was barely audible. I'm scared, Peter. I don't think these things are from. The radio cut off. No noise, no static. No connection with her two-way. I pressed the button and whispered, Gwen, can you hear me? Silence. The cabin's two-way shorted out and died. I ran to my personal two-way but knew that I didn't have the range with it. She was alone, cut off from all humanity. I bolted up and ran to the catwalk. The curtain of fog was inching closer. I thought about Harry driving like a madman towards it with reckless abandon. He needed to turn back, but there was no way to reach him now. My heart ached. That man had a family. With nothing to do but prepare for the approaching wave, I locked the catwalk and moved the sparse furniture towards the open windows. Not to stop them from coming, but to slow them down in the hopes that the military might have a plan. I pulled out my handgun, loaded it, and watched the fog roll toward me. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if any of us will get out of this alive. I don't know if this can even be stopped. I turned to the southern approach, miles from the darkening fog, and admired the landscape. It really is pretty up here.